here today with Peter Harold, Managing Director and CEO of Poseidon Nickel. Peter, thanks for your time.
Thanks, David.
An exciting suite of assets, nickel assets in Western Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. Three assets. I mean, Black Swan, which is the premier project for us at the moment, and then obviously Lake Johnson and the old Windara, which was the original Poseidon project. Yeah, three really quality nickel assets at the right time in the nickel price cycle.
And well endowed with infrastructure in the region.
Yeah, that's one of the key things about our business. So Black Swan's got a 2.2 million tonne per annum processing plant and all the other infrastructure. Lake Johnson, 1.5 million tonne plant. Windara doesn't have a plant because it was put on care and maintenance many years ago, and the plant was, the site was rehabilitated. But yeah, those other two assets are key assets in the portfolio.
So the million-dollar question all the shareholders would want to know is, how are you advancing those two key projects towards production?
Yeah, okay. So look, basically with Black Swan, it was a project that was, I mean, I was involved in the discovery back in 1995, and we discovered Silver Swan, which was a wonderful asset, 440,000 tonnes of nickel averaging 14%, one of the highest grade discoveries ever. An amazing project, and we brought that into production within a couple of years, and that then turned out to be a much bigger ore body, and there was something like 140,000 tonnes of nickel mined from Silver Swan over about a 15-year period, nearly 20 years. Project was put on care and maintenance. We've picked it up from Norilsk back in about 2015, and we did a study on a restart, which was incorporating a low-grade Black Swan open pit cutback together with some stockpiled material and some high-grade Silver Swan from underground. And that project looked okay. However, the discovery of Golden Swan has kind of really changed the whole story. So what happened was, about 12 months ago now, we made a discovery about 300 metres away from the old Silver Swan project, or Silver Swan ore body, in an area that really hadn't been tested before. And this is what we now call the Golden Swan mineralisation. So we've got three really good thick intersections, sort of running 8%, 4 or 5 metres of true width. So over about 170 metres by 60 metres, which is what the EM plate is saying. So there's a decent sized mineralised package there. What we need to do now is work out how big it is and whether we can convert it into a mine. So that's the primary objective at the moment.
Got you excited though?
I'm very excited because look, it's high grade, and so obviously what we need to do now is to work out a plan to get ourselves into production given the nickel price outlook.
Talking of plans, 2021 already underway. What does this year look like for Poseidon?
Yeah, so look, it's the real key here is to work out the Golden Swan story. How big is it? So what we've done is we raised some money late last year through Morgan's, a placement which was really well subscribed. What we're doing with that money is primarily around the Golden Swan project. So what we're looking at doing first of all is putting in a drill drive. It's about a 400-metre drive off the Silver Swan decline. We're about halfway down that, or halfway along that drive now. That drive will be finished in March, and then the plan is to put 2 rigs in and drill out the mineralisation at the extent of which we currently know at the moment, which is that EM plate, which covers about 170 metres vertically by about 60 metres wide. That's going to take us about 3 months to drill out, and then the next part of the project would be to convert that into a resource, hopefully into a reserve, put a mine plan around it obviously to get the reserve, and then look at how that fits with the original plan to restart Black Swan. So do we mine Golden Swan by itself? Do we mine Golden Swan and Silver Swan together? Or do we go for the bigger project, which would be Golden Swan, Silver Swan and the Black Swan open pit? So lots of swans, but certainly there's a lot of nickel there. So what we have to try and do is, and then work out whether that makes sense to, the restart of the mill, what size mill do we look at? So we could start off on a small basis, which would be the high grade underground material. We could potentially sell that to a third party to start off with to generate early cash flow, and then use that obviously to develop the larger operation down the track, or we could go straight into the larger operation. So these things all need to be studied. We've got the basis of that study from the original work that was done a couple of years ago. We just need to drop the Golden Swan, potentially assuming we do get a resource and reserve, put that into the plan and then understand from an economic perspective which is the best way to go. So look, we've done some preliminary metallurgical test work which has been very positive. We're looking at that now. Obviously we'll do more as we start the drilling for Golden Swan, the resource and reserve drilling. All of those things have got to be done, sort of before we can really start the marketing push. And then obviously we'll go out to the market and see what the terms are like for the particular different types of concentrate we could produce. We could produce the concentrate just from Golden Swan or from the Golden Swan Silver Swan, the DSO. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So those work streams will all be underway in the third quarter. And the whole idea is that we sort of reach a crescendo towards the end of the year where we've got all the information in hand to then make a call on which is the best way to go, hopefully so that we can get back into production in 2022. That's the target.
And what's your view on the nickel market, particularly into 2022?
Look, I think with the way that the whole electric vehicle thematic is developing, and you're seeing announcements almost on a daily basis now about motor car manufacturers stopping producing gasoline and going all electric. I mean, Jaguar came out a couple of days ago and said 2025 all electric. So I guess the time frame seems to be shortening. And as a result, the demand for nickel, looks to be set to, achieve some of the targets that they're talking about. I mean, 500,000 tonnes of nickel in batteries by 2025. Currently, it's about just over 100,000 tonnes, going up to maybe 1 million tonnes by 2030. I mean, these numbers are pretty staggering when you look at the primary nickel production at the moment. It's around about 2.2 million tonnes. So you could be talking about a 30% increase in demand for nickel in a whole new area, and that doesn't include obviously the increased demand for stainless steel, which has always been growing. So it does bode well for the nickel price, and I'm not sure, the whole market is not sure where all the nickel is going to come from, and certainly our project could feed into that, and that's what we're sort of targeting, would be moving into production at a time when the nickel price is really starting to take off.
Clearly focused on your two primary assets, but what about the other assets in the portfolio?
Yeah, so as you said, the primary focus is Golden Swan, Black Swan. The other assets, obviously Lake Johnson, which has got the mill, and it's got a resource there of about 50,000 tonnes of nickel at Maggie Hayes. We need to do some more work on that and decide, but it's not a priority for us at the moment. The priority is the Black Swan, Golden Swan, Silver Swan story. Similarly with Lake Johnson, similarly with Windara, there's quite a bit of nickel there at Cerberus and Windara itself, about 150,000 tonnes of nickel, but about 1.5% nickel. That material, there's no mill there, obviously, so if we wanted to get that in production, we'd either have to build a mill or ship it to a third party. So again, need some more work. And at the same time, we've also got a gold project as well, which is the old tailings, which we're finishing off a feasibility study on too. So these things are all going to be looked at, but they're not the primary focus of the business. They'll be done sort of in a sequential manner. And then we'll look at, when we've finished those studies, what the best thing to do with those assets is. But right now, the primary focus is Black Swan, Golden Swan, Silver Swan.
As you say, a big year this year for Poseidon Nickel, moving into hopefully a production phase in a rising nickel market. Peter, thanks for your time.
Thanks very much, Dave.